And so the main drains are the internal and external pudendal veins that drain into the internal and external iliac veins. Now we're going to go a little bit into more detail. So looking here, we see the external iliac veins. They're the ones that go down into the legs and drain the legs and then part of the pelvis. And then the internal iliac veins, those are the ones that do most of the drainage out of the pelvis. They come into the common iliac veins on both sides, which then come into the inferior vena cava and takes the blood back up to the heart. So what we see in the vulva is that there's a lot of kind of mixed drainage patterns. So the redundancy, the body loves redundancy when there's something really important. And so we're going to see like a lot of anastomosis, a lot of alternative routes in the drainage system. And of course, it's not just important to drain the venous system, but also the lymphatic system, because that also, when the veins slow down, you're going to get leakage out into the lymphatic system. And then also when there's congestion, you're going to get enlargement of the lymph nodes. That's going to slow down the lymphatics. So you're going to see lymphatic involvement in almost all cases of varicosities or vulvar varicosities. So generally be a component that also needs to be addressed. So remember, the internal pudendal veins drain into the internal iliac vein, and the internal pudendal veins get blood from the inferior rectal veins, the clitoral veins, the posterior labial veins, the penile and scrotal veins, the anus, urogenital diaphragm, perineum. That all goes internal, iliac vein. And then the external pudendal vein goes into external iliac vein, and that will drain clitoris, labia, penis, and scrotum. Then this external pudendal vein is the one that goes into the external iliac vein. But first, here's the deep pudendal and superficial pudendal going into the great saphenous vein. This is in the leg. And so that's why, with vulvar varicosities, a lot of times they'll get that heaviness in the upper thigh right here. And that's because this part is not draining right. So the great saphenous vein drains into the femoral vein, and that goes under this inguinal ligament. And that is where the hip hooks up into the pelvis. That's kind of like the crease when you sit down, where you bend, and that's like the crease between the leg and the belly. And so because there's a big, ligament that's going over the top of that femoral vein, this area, it can have more constraint. And also because we do a lot of sitting, so we tend to be pretty tight in this area. And so everything that's under that, or say inferior, further down the leg from that inguinal ligament or that crease in your leg, is going to have a tendency to get a bit squished. And then that femoral vein changes its name into that external iliac vein once it gets into the pelvis underneath of that inguinal ligament. So here's just another view. So here you see the inguinal ligament. Here's your leg, right? So this is the part we're getting a close up of. So there is the kind of like hole that everything has to go into from the leg to get into the pelvis. You can see there can be fascial constraint here. And there's the external pudendal veins, these two right here, that have to go into the saphenous, which goes into the femoral, which goes into that hole, which then goes into the external iliac vein here. It's just a little close up. So that external iliac vein, we talked about how it drains the lower extremity, the external genitalia, that comes from the external pudendal vein. It also drains the mons pubis. That's the mound of, it usually has hair or sometimes has hair in the front of the pelvis, and also the inferior abdominal wall. So this external iliac vein is draining quite a bit. So I wanted to show this picture of that pubic vein. So it's actually related to the obturator vein. And so sometimes you'll see that here's the pubic vein that's draining into that external iliac vein, but it can also get backed up. If there's backup here on the external iliac vein, then it can back up into the obturator. And so like I was saying before, the body has redundancy. It has alternative routes, and this is one of them. So, because a lot of times you'll see people with lower extremity varicosities, pelvic varicosities, they'll have a very, very puffy pubic region, and they'll be like, why am I so puffy here? And it's because even though the pubic region is higher up, the thing that's being constrained or constricted is further down. So it's important to know about the drainage pattern so you can check the right areas to get optimal drainage. So we have these venous plexes that are really important too for draining. So the uterovaginal plexus right here is going to drain not only into the internal iliac vein, which then goes into the common iliac veins and the vena cava on both sides, it's also draining into the ovarian veins. And so this is super important because now we're seeing again how there's more involvement with structures that are higher up. So the left ovarian vein is like very commonly the cause of pelvic congestion. And that's because it has like a really kind of difficult route of going home, because it can't just plug into the vena cava like the right ovarian vein. It has to go all the way up into the renal vein and then cross over. Of course, what's here? That's going to be the aorta, the whole artery blood supply going down. So this is kind of, it's not just like, hello, I'm just plugged in. It has, there's more possibility for things going wrong when you have to plug into the left renal vein, and then the left renal vein has to go across and plug into the vena cava. And so all I'm saying is that you gotta know the circulatory system so that you can get a better idea of what's involved and what's going on. You can't just look, oh, there's the vulva, let's just treat the vulva. No, you have to know how it's related to everything else and what to do about it.